Good evening. Today, Dr. G.S. Jayasree, founding editor of Samyukta, a journal of gender and culture, and who was professor and head Institute of English, University of Kerala, will speak on researching translation studies. The focus of her presentation would be to explore the possibilities of new and innovative research in translation studies. It is suggested that by linking translation studies to the existing and to fresh areas of research in different disciplines, it is possible to infuse a new life into the field of translation studies. This is already being done in many of the forward-looking universities. Along with the discussion of potential research areas and texts, tomorrow we will also have a talk by Reshma Ann Rollin on the same subject. So we hope you benefit from this talk by Dr. G.S. Jayasree, and we expect you to also tune into what we have planned for tomorrow. On to the talk.
We have always led translated lives. Personally, I have never thought of translation as a purely textual activity. As every moment in our life, we are involved in the act of translation. We translate our thoughts into words, our words into action, and so on. It is a never-ending process, as natural as breathing. However, when it comes to the academic field of studying translation or translation studies, I've found that we have always boxed it in. I think it has something to do with the scholars. By this, I don't mean the academics, because not all academics are scholars. The scholars' tendency to put everything into boxes, close them, put them into boxes and close them so that there are no spillages. After Derrida, all of us are scared of meanings spilling over. Well, so we close the boxes and neatly label them. Well, this is not anything new. It has always been so in the Western world. Well, almost. Since the 18th century, the West made a religion of it. I don't want to go into the details, but I'm sure that those who are watching this video know how naming and tagging became an obsession with the West since 18th century. Let me be more specific here. Since the 18th century, an obsession with the continent of Europe. And as regular West-looking automatons, my translation of the term here is Thiram Padinyaru Nokki Yendrangal. Those of us who are lucky to have a mind and body taken over by our colonizing masters, we suspended our thoughts and began imitating our masters in everything that we do, in the dress we wear, in the food we eat, even in the way we laugh or cry. We have taken it to such extremes that our ways of expressing love and something even more intimate than that has taken to the language of English. I'm told that the young these days no longer say, "Njan ninne snehikkunnu." It is always, "I love you." Even love here stands translated. This is because we have set before us the great ambition of looking like our masters, thinking like our masters, acting like our masters. Perhaps as the texts and movies and the whole influx of the documents of the masters have taught us too. I would like to call it imitation. Not imitation in the Aristotelian sense, but pure and simple. The wish to imitate somebody who is different, somebody whom we think is superior to us. We have naturalized this mode of imitation to such an extent that we don't even realize that it is imitation. Colonization as imitation. Or let me stretch it a little further and say colonization as imitation, translation as imitation. We look how close we have been able to come to the original here being the West as the norm. Well, it's a very complex kind of situation, and unfortunately we are not conscious of it or aware of it. Never mind, we are not like them. We are not wheatish or brown or even black skinned. Our notions of love, life, and even death are happily different from that of the West. Some of us believe in karma, others in the idea of punarjanma, a life after death. There are many who subscribe to it. To such people, to those who hope and believe that there is a life after death, death is not the end of life. There is always a hope of another life, coming back to this earth to act out our unfulfilled wishes, sometimes to expiate our sins. Well, those of you who are familiar with the myths and laws of our country, I don't have to explain this any further. But what did we do? Taking pride in how closely we come or could come to the original, as I told you even earlier, the original here being whatever came from the West, whatever we received uncritically from the West, continued to lead translated lives even after independence. I would say that the post-colonial subject is a translated subject. We happily lead our lives without knowing, without even being aware of our translated selves, trying to measure up to the strange standards that we have set before us. Here, as I already mentioned, the West is the norm. We keep mentioning, we have to keep repeating that the West has been the norm and the West continues to be the norm. The rest of us are deviants. And the West happens to be the norm, the rest of us are deviants. Damned selves who are always already translated. Those who are condemned to lead our lives imitating some invisible or intangible ideal. I say invisible and intangible because contrary to our understanding, these ideals that we imitate in the most uncritical fashion are never stable. These ideals are never constant, never fixed. They keep shifting. This because the master can never allow the aping subject to be like him. It's an inclusive him that I'm using here. So, once this poor thing has managed to crawl up to where the master has positioned himself, the master, with all his cunning that logic will permit, with all the rhetorical ploys that you can play out with language, the master will argue out the already short of breath subject as he has to struggle, he has had to struggle a long way up. And then what happens? The poor subject continues to lead his translated life. I wouldn't say this burden of leading translated lives became ours with the coming of the white-skinned man. Dominance and subservience has always been integral to our lives. Integral to our lives, particularly so in India. The wish, or I should say the will to dominate, is naturally in human beings. It is there, I believe, in the animal kingdom also. This method of building a hierarchy. Therefore, man has always tried to dominate woman. Those who believed that they were upper caste by virtue of their birth have tried to dominate the lower caste. Those who think that they belong to the kingdom of normative sexuality have always denigrated those who enjoy other forms of sexual experiences. The able-bodied and the able-minded have frowned upon the disabled. Well, this listing can go on. What I would like to say is that setting up the norm and indirectly challenging those who are left outside the imaginary homelands of these people who have actually set up the norm has been a way of life with us. Something that has largely gone unquestioned, mainly because those who are outside these normative structures never recognize the arbitrary nature of these norms, of these structures. It has become more or less a way of life with these people who have internalized and naturalized the fact that they have been relegated to the margins. So very much that the left outsiders keep talking of resistance, little realizing that as long as you continue to speak of resistance, you are leaving these structures and these systems intact. You are never questioning the structurality of the structure. Your resistance is always within the structure itself. This happens in the academic field also. This happens in translation. It is there everywhere. These structures are there everywhere. How those who are outside the system are always condemned to be translated, and that there are people who constantly monitor how close the translation has come to the original. The binary between the original and the translation never leaves us. Well, is there a way out of this? I believe so. As I stated at the beginning, the norm, the standard, the theory, I should repeat that, has a protean self. What we are seeing around us today is a tug of war between those whose interests are to have the norms intact and those who have recognized the structurality of the normative structures and therefore have freed themselves from this very idea of norms. This means you free your thoughts from the ideas that strangle you. You learn to breathe. You learn to live and to let live. Coming back to what I was saying at the beginning, I see hope wherever I look. I see hope in the form of young, blooming minds in the academia. I see hope in those never say die activists outside of the academia, those who dare to think beyond what they have internalized so far, those who have dared to throw away the baggage of ideas that they have inherited, those who are a little bothered about standards. I don't know how many of us are there who are little bothered about standards, because standards have got this very nature of strangling us, because the moment we deviate or move away, let me not use the word deviate, move away, that is seen as a deviation. So those who are little bothered about standards or about the very act of standardization, I can see this in the academic world also. As we are celebrating translation in its multitudinous avatars, I would like to present before you Reshma and Rowlin, a doctoral candidate in translation studies. Reshma and Rowlin, who is trying to chart out a new path in the field of translation studies. I would say that Reshma has no pretensions of being an intellectual, buddhijeevi. Let me translate that again. Yes, Reshma presents before us her experiments in translation studies and hints at the new directions translation studies can take in the academic world, particularly in that research in translation studies and in other disciplines also, in research that has now in our universities become hyphenated. Thank you.